Is a speech teacher, and it's unfortunate that he's employed every night of the year but 2 months, and that's in June and August. So we have to take advantage of his availability. I know he spoke just a couple months ago, but I offered to give him the floor once again, and Tom Moss told me that he had never heard religion before. He had heard that he was a great speaker, and he drove 450 miles to hear him talk tonight. So,
You did that?
No pressure.
Do it, Tom.
I had nothing else to do.
Get on.
I'm thinking with that kind of expectation, I'm going to go. I don't want to fall asleep now. At any rate, thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes with that wonderful breed of pigeons called Jacobins. You guys ever heard of Jacobin pigeons before? Yeah. Oh, wow, oh, cool. All right, the hands in the air. I brought a few things here to start, and I would just basically, if I can organize myself around this particular part, I'm going to start with just the standard, basically the parts of a Jacobin, which this is the standard drawing. You can see all the grand detail. But this has been busy, the Jacobin standard, since about the early 1960s when I first started raising them. I've had Jacobin pigeons, I says, every single day of my life since 1962. Without missing a beat, I've had Jacobin pigeons since then, starting in high school, of course. But this is the standard drawing that was alive and well in 1962, drawn by Jim Landenberger. And basically it's okay today. It gives you all kinds of space for interpretation. But it basically is a standard that says the Jacobin, this is a side view. Evan, where's my box with the other stuff in it? The statue. There's a three-dimensional thing, and I'd like to operate on a couple of views here. This is the standard. It shows basically what the parts are. And I'll basically share some history of the Jacobin, some interesting features about them, and then we'll talk about some of the stuff I'm doing with them, and I'll show you some actual live samples. This is the line drawing done by Jim Landenberger as the side, but thanks to the efficient work of Art Pamplona, who has a wonderful ceramic figure of an English trumpeter, and we did an instructional moment with Art. He started off with the standard, and then he went to the English trumpeter statue. And I would say, here's the standard of the Jacobin, and here's a ceramic model. This was done by Bob Coble of Denver, Colorado, who's a major Jacobin breeder. It's sort of like real, but it gives you the idea that the bird is three-dimensional. It's not just a line drawing that you see from one side. It has a back, it has a side, it has a top, and basically all of these qualities and characteristics, if you remember that the Jacobin is a three-dimensional figure, that all of these descriptions here, because you see the side view, there's also a top view, a back view, a front view, a three-quarters view, and all the rest of that goes as well. But this is the ideal Jacobin as perceived by the master breeders back in the early 1950s, and it stands today as the modern Jacobin standard. And so what's happened here, historically, the Jacobin pigeon was first probably invented, you think about discovered, some characteristic that through this particular formation of feather and the backward spin. There's three parts to the Jacobin hood. And I'm going to these are sample pigeons. This is a Jacobin of decent quality. I'm going to put a couple of things up here behind me. But this is a Jacobin, and the hood formation is a whole lot of extended stuff. There are three basic formations to it though. On the inside, behind the head, what would be on a helmet, that's the crest, what they call the shell crest. And then interior, behind that, there's another formation, like on a Bocara trumpeter, that rides a little bit lower than the shell crest. I think that probably is called the shell. Anyway, they have the crest and then the shell that's behind it. And then there's a third formation called pinwheels, and that's what forms this rose. So it formulates the inside crest, and then there's another crest behind it. But then on the side of the neck runs this thing like a chrysanthemum, and the reason they call it the chrysanthemum of pigeons is that it's like a flower. And so this rose in here, where the feathers all radiate out from the rose, that hold all the interior structure together with a whole bunch of parts of it. But this is a pretty decent quality pigeon. But if you look at that interior formation, you can see 3 separate parts that have the interior crest, the shell, and then the outside spinning part, which is called pinwheels. And they are 3 separate genetic characteristics, so you could separate those out. And knowing this, because I've started from scratch a whole bunch of times to produce Jacobins, I know that all sorts of varieties of stuff are involved in here. You can raise two parts of it, or 1 part of it, or 3 parts of it. The best ones have all 3 in some grand combination, but you can also produce individual birds that have just 1, interior crest, shell crest, or pinwheels alone. And if you see one, the Levi's book, the pigeon, and there's a picture of a bird called the Leonardo, L-E-N-A-R-D-O, if you're familiar with that book. And those are pinwheels. The thing comes off to the side, and it's kind of an incomplete genetic formation. It's sort of dominant, recessive, interior. Doesn't work all the time. But to be able to produce this, again, and I'm just going to put this bird down here because it's a very decent quality of bird. Give him a chance to settle in. But basically the Jacobin pigeon comes from a historical perspective. There was a guy by the name of Aldrovandi, A-L-D-R-O-V-A-N-D-I, that drew pictures of Jacobin pigeons that existed in the 1600s. And if you have a book by Aldrovandi, he's Italian, and they're in Italian, and the pictures are in Italian, you can probably understand them. But they're Jacobins that are 500 years old now. 1500, what is it, 1400, 1600, anyway. Aldrovandi drew Jacobin pigeons that had this little tiny interior crest. If you look at Levi's book, about every single breed of pigeon in there, it goes through sort of like the history of, or the evolution of breeds. From 1700, 1600, Aldrovandi's usually the first one, then they go to Lyell, and you'll have Fulton, and then maybe in the Jacobins, for instance, they have Hill, and then Bogue, which has about 4 or 5. When I created the Andalusian Jacobin back in the 1970s, this was the standard. It appeared pretty much like that set of stuff that was in Levi's book. Generation 1 looked like this half Jacobin, half Homer type pigeon. It had just a little tiny squirrel of a crest kind of formation on the back of the head. Aldrovandi drew it, and Aldrovandi's picture or drawing looked pretty much like this bird. And then generation after generation, as it appears every 50 years or so, they got a new version. The Fulton version looks pretty much like this, and the later Lyell version looks much like this. The Lobenstein version looks like this one, and then in basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations of Jacobin pigeons. It took me 5 years. Actually, it only took 13 years to do this first genetic project. But in 5 separate crosses, I was able to produce Jacobins that added all of the genetic details that Aldrovandi identified, that Lyell identified, and others. We have, you have the other book too, Ev? Yeah. It's here somewhere. There are 2 books that I brought. This is all historical stuff, and the more recent one. This is Charles Darwin's Animals and Plants Under Domestication from 1876, 1856. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in here about pigeons. Darwin identifies the pigeon as the single most perfect example of evolution. And so if we have all of these creatures that evolved basically down from the blue rock dove or the blue rock pigeon, Darwin spends like a third of this book about pigeons, but he's also talking about sweet peas and geraniums and pigs and lambs and all of that. But Animals and Plants Under Domestication, Charles Darwin, there were 2 versions, and this is volume 2, I think, about pigeons. I got this from George Nuremberg back in 1959. I think I may have been one of the only persons he ever gave a book to. George Nuremberg knew how to pinch 2 nickels together. And he was president of the Los Angeles Pigeon Club when I first met him back in 1959. But by 1960, he thought I had enough information and enough representational clue that this book would do me some good one day, so he handed it to me as a gift. And it was like, he kept trying to buy it back from me about 7 or 8 times out of all of the years, and I thought it was pretty cool. But Darwin, a brilliant guy, had all kinds of work that he did with genetics on pigeons. If you read from one of the Levi's book, he had reversion to wild type is a concept that Darwin had by mating two totally opposite different kinds of pigeons together. It goes back to wild type. You made a Jacobin to a fantail or a Jacobin to a Norwich Crocker. If you look at this pigeon, she's a very, very good Jacobin pigeon. I put her on my hands, her outline on the side is really nice. She's going to try to fly. Okay, anyway, she real hard, smooth feather. The outline is good, very nice outline. She's got a slim neck. Inside, all the hood feather on top is wonderful. But if you look at what is a good hood setting, if you look at this pigeon from the top and you look at that stuff that comes behind, the stuff that comes behind the head, and you look at what this pigeon does, it's almost perfect. It's symmetrical, left and right, side to side. Has a crest, the interior crest, the shell crest is nice. And this bird, if you're looking straight at it, you can see it has a really nice hood setting and hood and top. The hood and top, the hard feather is smooth. You look at it from the side, it looks good. You look at it from the top, it looks good. You look at it from the back, it's nice and full and has good hard feather quality, it looks good. You look at it from the front, at any rate, this bird has a terrific hood and top. This is a very, very good, so actually, 20 points possible, maybe this bird would get 18 of those 20 points because it's a really good quality pigeon for hood and top. On the other hand, I'm going to show you a pigeon that has this wonderful outline, but if you look at this bird from the front and the top, do you see anything here? What do you see on this bird that was different than the other one?
Not symmetrical.
This is really messed up. The hood setting is really screwy. The whole left side goes clear down behind the ear, and the whole, this is not a good hood setting. This is terrible. Alright? It's a great pigeon, and the only flaw on this bird is the hood setting. Now, if you were to try to breed a good pigeon, I'm not getting rid of this pigeon, by the way. She's a very, very good, useful pigeon, but you would never mate it to another bird that didn't have a great hood setting and as many other good qualities as you could get on the same pigeon that didn't have that same flaw. But look at how this hood setting is put together. That's the hood and top. But this is 20 points on a Jacobin standard. And this bird, how many points would you give it out of 20? 2? Maybe 4? Thanks, John, you're being very generous. I think, but this is a terrible hood setting.
It looks a lot softer feathered too.
It is softer feather. It has softer feather, but for the outline, for a young, she's got a great outline, a great station, a good full feather, and all of that. But the hood setting is terrible. So you have a good hood setting, you have a poor hood setting. So that particular quality, the rest of the bird is really well put together and nicely done. To the chain, and I was explaining to my son earlier, we were trying to pick out birds that have samples of stuff. The chain on the Jacobin is that front, the part that goes forward of the beak. That's this part from here to here. That's called the chain, C-H-A-N, like, I don't know, chain gang, I don't know. At any rate, that's the chain on the forward part of the bird. And what will happen here is that that's supposed to kind of close up. On the kite that I just showed you, she's got a nice chain. It closes up at the bottom, it runs up and opens up around her head, and then it's supposed to curve around the head and then take over the other side and then nicely come down the other side. If you look at this one is described, this one is a red cockbird, but this one is open face. This bird, the chain comes almost out this way, giving you a whole look like the bird is wide open to the chain like this. But you see this pigeon from the front, and the head is completely visible from the forward part, and the chain just sticks out. Now the bird is smooth, and it's got a beautiful outline. It's got some other wonderful qualities about it, but the chain is wide open. So it's a very useful pigeon for raising other ones. But this is not a bird that's going to win a show because it's wide open. It does have wonderful hard smooth feather though, good color, good outline, good thick amount of feather, and decent markings. But it's got to have everything to be a show winner, and this bird has this wide open chain that opens here. Notice the difference.
How many points would that you give that hood?
That's 20 points for the hood and top and 20 points for the chain. Look at the difference between these two birds. Here's a good one, and here's an open. See, this bird's wide open, and this one closes up much better. If you'll give you a shot.
How many points
So did the judge pick him up and look for that feature?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A judge would look for that. It's 20 points. It's the second, it's the most, first most important item on the bird.
So how many for the bad?
1 point.
And take them way away. You might give them 10.
And then,
You know, this bird might be a 10 because it's hard and smooth and extends out, but it doesn't close up. But look, see this one, down the bottom, it closes up, it meets at the bottom and opens up. This one's got a very nice form chain from the lower part, and this was really well put together. This one, by the way, was best read at the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Super Bowl of Jacobins, 250 Jacobins competing. This was the best read. It was the best of its color, not grand champion of the show, but best of its color competing against maybe 40 or 50 other red Jacobins. This was the best red Jacobin in the show. This one would not have placed. This one would have and did. So we got a big trophy at home that says best red Super Bowl of Jacobins on this guy. So if you look at him, you look at this pigeon, you think, my, that's a fine, wonderful Jacobin. It's big. What do you notice about this pigeon?
Soft feather.
It's loose, it's soft feathered, it's huge, it's big. What about the chain? You see the chain? You see the hood and top? Well, he's got a decent hood and top. But this bird, for all of the outline that it has, the rest of the thing is flat. It's not thick and smooth. See how the mane is looked like a back of an axe? You say like an axe blade? You could probably cut wood with this thing if you could. But see, it has no shape to it at all. It's thick, it's just flat on both sides. It comes like, even with a finger cross, you could have, you'd like it to look like the edge of a glazed donut. And this bird's just straight out, and you're lucky to have it all shaggy, and maybe it's creasy in here. So this is not a good quality for that. It's a good breeding bird for length of feather and outline, but it's a softer feather bird. The chain is decent. You look at the chain on the bird, it's decent, closes up, it's not open, but it has all of this stuff in the top, which is sort of empty, and it doesn't have this nice roll and nice fit to it that this blue grizzle I showed you. Now here you just look at this one and compare the hooded top on this bird to this beautiful number that I showed you. Let's compare it. This is desirable, the other one is not. This is desirable, the other one is not. And so what you can see is this whole quality and character of this whole upper formation. That's the most important feature on the Jacobin, is that hood and top. And you want it thick, and you want it smooth, and you want it full of feather, you want it extended out as far as it can. Good quality pigeons come that way. There's some other fun stuff in here. The part of the chain, I wanted to show you a good chain on a Jacobin. And what I had to do was go to a project pigeon here. This is a kite Jacobin. This is probably as good as, you can see the hood setting on this one is decent. The chain on this bird is decent. It closes up nice, it extends out nice. The mane could use a little thicker, but this is August, it's late breeding season, they're about to go into their molt. They've been breeding that's rough, and so, okay, I'm not making excuses. But some very decent quality pigeons.